Nikolai Sokolov, the Bratva's deadliest enforcer. To him, the waitress trembling with the wine bottle was just furniture, just another invisible servant to be mocked, used, and discarded. He laughed at her, insulting her honor in Russian, thinking she was just a clueless American girl. He couldn't have been more wrong. When she locked eyes with him and replied in the perfect, cold dialect of the Moscow underworld, the music stopped, the guards froze, and the most feared man in the city realized too late. The woman holding the wine wasn't a servant. She was the one thing he should have feared. The Obsidian Room in downtown Manhattan didn't just smell of money. It smelled of old power and fresh corruption. It was the kind of place where a bottle of Chateau Petrus cost more than a Honda Civic, and the men sitting in the velvet booths decided who became a senator and who ended up in the Hudson River. For Cassidy, it was just a hiding spot. Table 4 needs a refill on the sparkling water. Don't make eye contact, the floor manager, Silas, hissed as he passed her. Silas was a nervous little man who sweated through his polyester suits, terrified of his own clientele. On it, Cassidy murmured, adjusting the heavy tray on her shoulder. Her name wasn't really Cassidy. It wasn't really Sarah, or Paige, or any of the 3 names she'd used in the last 4 years. But Cassidy was the name on the name tag pinned to her chest, right above the cheap, scratchy fabric of her uniform. She kept her blonde hair pulled back in a severe, unflattering bun, and wore glasses she didn't need. The goal was to be forgettable, to be a ghost. She moved through the dimly lit dining room with practiced efficiency. She had spent the last 6 months here, serving the worst of New York's elite. Hedge fund managers who tipped in stock tips, politicians with their mistresses, and the occasional cartel lieutenant trying to look legitimate. She swallowed her pride every night, took their abuse, and went home to a tiny studio apartment in Queens with 3 deadbolt locks. She was safe here, or so she thought. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted at 8:15 p.m. It was a subtle change, like the air pressure dropping before a tornado touches down. The ambient chatter died out. The clinking of silverware on china stopped. The double doors swung open, and 3 men walked in. Cassidy felt the chill hit her spine before she even looked up. She knew that walk. She knew that specific brand of arrogant silence. Leading the pack was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite and dressed by an Italian tailor, Nikolai Sokolov. He was tall, with hair the color of midnight, and eyes that looked like shattered ice. He wore a charcoal 3-piece Brioni suit that fit him like a second skin, not a single crease out of place. On his wrist sat a Patek Philippe Nautilus, platinum, understated, but worth a fortune. He was the new Pahan, the boss of the Russian Bratva in New York, a man rumors said had killed his way to the top with his bare hands. Behind him were his dogs, Dmitri, a hulking mass of muscle with a scar running through his eyebrow, and Victor, the younger, jumpier one, who always kept a hand near his jacket pocket. Cassidy's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Don't look up. Don't breathe wrong. Just be the furniture. They were seated at the VIP booth in the far corner, the one with the best view of the exits. It was Cassidy's section. Cassidy, Silas whispered, appearing at her elbow, his face pale. They requested the vintage list. You take it. I have to check on the kitchen. Coward. She took the leather-bound wine list, her hands trembling slightly. She forced herself to take a deep breath. She had survived worse than waiting on a mobster. She had survived the fire in St. Petersburg. She had survived the purge. She could pour wine for Nikolai Sokolov. She approached the table, keeping her eyes lowered to the level of the tablecloth. Good evening, gentlemen, she said, her voice soft, American, harmless. The wine list. She placed the book on the table. Nikolai didn't look at her. He was busy scanning the room, his eyes dissecting every shadow. Dmitri, however, looked. He looked her up and down with a sneer that made her skin crawl. Water, Nikolai said. His voice was deep, a heavy baritone wrapped in a thick, velvety accent. Still, no ice. Of course, Cassidy said. She retreated to the service station, her hands shaking as she filled 3 crystal glasses. Just get through the shift, she told herself. 1 hour. Then they leave. Then you go home. When she returned, the men were speaking in low, rapid-fire Russian. They weren't discussing business, they were discussing the city. Who needed to be squeezed, who needed to be paid off. They spoke freely, arrogant in the assumption that the American help couldn't understand a word. Cassidy understood every syllable. She placed the water down in front of Dmitri first, then Victor. Finally, she moved to Nikolai. As she leaned in to place the glass on a coaster, Dmitri reached out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was like iron, bruising her skin. "Careful, sweet thing," Dmitri grunted in English, flashing a yellow-toothed smile. "You almost spilled it." She hadn't. Her hand had been steady. It was a power play, a way to dominate the space. "I apologize, sir," Cassidy whispered, trying to pull her arm back. He didn't let go. Nikolai finally turned his head. He looked at Dmitri, then at Cassidy's trapped wrist, then up at her face. His eyes were terrifyingly intelligent. He wasn't looking at her like a person. He was assessing a threat level. Finding none, he looked bored. "Dmitri," Nikolai said, switching to English, "let the girl go. We are here to eat, not to play with the livestock." Livestock. Dmitri laughed and released her arm. Cassidy stumbled back a half step, clutching her wrist. A red mark was already forming. "Bring us the Grand Cru," Nikolai ordered, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. "And be quick about it." Cassidy retreated to the kitchen, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She leaned against the stainless steel counter, closing her eyes. The rage was a hot, molten knot in her stomach. She hated them. She hated their arrogance, their cruelty, the way they looked at the world as something to be consumed. But she couldn't do anything. She was Cassidy Miller, a waitress from Ohio. She wasn't Katerina Volkov anymore. Katerina Volkov was dead. She had to stay dead. 30 minutes passed. The restaurant filled up, the noise level rising to a dull roar. Cassidy tried to swap tables with another server, a guy named Greg, but Silas caught her. "No switching," Silas hissed. Sokolov asked for the blonde. "You go back out there." Asked for the blonde. A chill went through her. She picked up the tray with their appetizers, Osetra caviar and blinis, naturally, and walked back into the lion's den. As she approached table 4, the mood had shifted. They were drinking vodka now, straight from a frozen bottle. Dmitri was loud, his face flushed. Nikolai remained sober, watchful, sipping his drink like it was water. Cassidy began to clear the empty glasses to make room for the food. She moved quickly, trying to be invisible. Dmitri was telling a story in Russian, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear the tone, if not the words. "So I told the little rat," Dmitri bragged in Russian, slamming his hand on the table, "if you don't have the money, I take the wife. Fair trade, right, boss?" Nikolai swirled his vodka. "You lack finesse, Dmitri. That is why you will always be a hammer, never the hand." "A hammer gets the job done," Dmitri grunted. He looked up as Cassidy reached across the table to collect a napkin. He decided he was bored again. As she leaned over, Dmitri deliberately knocked his heavy elbow into her tray. It happened in slow motion. The crystal glass on her tray tipped. Ice and water cascaded down onto the pristine white tablecloth, splashing onto the sleeve of Nikolai's $3,000 suit. The entire section of the restaurant went silent. Cassidy froze. She clutched the tray to her chest, her eyes wide. I'm so sorry. I didn't..." Nikolai slowly looked down at his wet sleeve. He brushed a droplet of water off the wool. Then he looked up at Cassidy. His face was unreadable, which made it infinitely more terrifying than Dmitri's anger. "You clumsy bitch!" Dmitri roared in English, half rising from his seat. "Do you know how much that costs?" "Sit down, Dmitri," Nikolai said calmly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a gavel sentence. Dmitri sat. though we kept glaring at Cassidy. Nikolai locked eyes with her. "You are shaking," he observed in English. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll get a towel. I'll pay for the cleaning," Cassidy stammered, playing the part. The terrified waitress. Nikolai leaned back, crossing his arms. He looked at her with pure, unadulterated contempt. He turned to Dmitri and spoke in Russian, his voice low, assuming total privacy in his insults. "Look at her," Nikolai said in Russian, his tone dripping with aristocratic disdain. "Shaking like a leaf. This is what happens when you let peasants into high society. They smell the money and lose their minds." Dmitri laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "She's pretty though, boss. Maybe we take her with us. Teach her how to be useful?" Nikolai sneered. "She is garbage, Dmitri. Look at her eyes. Empty, cowardly. American women are soft. They have no spine. She is just a piece of meat with a name tag. Leave her be. I don't want to dirty my hands." Something inside Cassidy snapped. It was the word coward. She had watched her father die. She had walked through a minefield in Chechnya to escape the FSB. She had dismantled a Glock in under 5 seconds when she was 12 years old. She had erased her entire existence to survive. She was many things, a liar, a survivor, a ghost. But she was not a coward. And she was certainly not meat. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered. Cassidy stopped trembling. Her posture straightened, the slump of the tired waitress vanishing instantly. Her chin lifted. The fear in her eyes evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard diamond of fury. She tossed the dirty napkin she was holding onto the table. It landed right in front of Nikolai. The restaurant was quiet, watching the scene, expecting the poor girl to run away, crying. Instead, Cassidy looked Nikolai dead in the eye. "Your suit is replaceable, Sokolov," she said. She didn't speak in English. She spoke in Russian, but not just any Russian. She spoke in the Fenya, the criminal argot of the high-ranking thieves-in-law, with the specific, aristocratic St. Petersburg lilt that only the old families used. It was a dialect of authority, of command. "But your manners," she continued, her Russian flawless, cold as a Siberian winter, "those cannot be bought, apparently, not even with all your blood money." The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavier than the silence when they had walked in. This was the silence of a bomb that had just armed itself. Dmitri's mouth fell open. The glass in Victor's hand stopped halfway to his mouth. Nikolai stared at her. For the first time all night, the boredom vanished from his face. His pupils dilated. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the predator hiding beneath the prey's skin. He slowly stood up. He towered over her, radiating menace. "Who are you?" Nikolai asked in Russian, his voice a low growl. Cassidy didn't flinch. She stepped closer to him, invading his personal space, challenging him in a way no one had done in years. "I am the person who decides if you get your wine," she replied in Russian, her voice dropping an octave, deadly serious, "or if I pour the rest of this bottle down your throat." "Sit down, Nikolai. You are making a scene." She switched back to English, turning her head to the stunned floor manager hovering nearby. "Silas," she called out, her voice clear and commanding. "Mr. Sokolov needs a fresh napkin, and bring the key 82, Margot. On the house." She looked back at the Mafia Don, her blue eyes blazing with a dark fire. "Unless there's a problem," she challenged. Nikolai looked at her, stunned, intrigued, and for the first time in his life, impressed. "No problem," Nikolai said softly, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "No problem at all." The rest of the dinner service was an exercise in psychological warfare. Most servers would have fled. They would have faked an illness, run out the back door, and never returned to pick up their last paycheck. But Cassidy knew that running now would be a death sentence. Men like Nikolai Sokolov were predators. If you ran, their instinct to chase kicked in. If you stood your ground, however, they became cautious. They analyzed. She returned to the table with the 1982 Chateau Margaux. Her hands were steady now, her face a mask of professional indifference. Silas, the manager, watched from the kitchen doorway, chewing his fingernails. He had expected bloodshed. Instead, he saw the most feared man in New York, watching his waitress with the intensity of a man studying a complex chess move. Cassidy presented the bottle to Nikolai. She didn't look at Dmitri or Victor. To her, they were already dead men walking. Thugs with guns but no brains. Nikolai was the only gravity in the room. Chateau Margaux, 1982, she announced, her voice flat, decanted as requested. Toe. She poured a splash into his glass for the tasting. Nikolai didn't look at the wine. He looked at her wrists, checking for tattoos. He looked at her neck, checking for scars. He was dissecting her history. He picked up the glass, swirled it once, and drank. Perfect, he murmured in Russian. You learned to pour like that in Ohio, Cassidy? He said her fake name like it was a joke. I watch a lot of YouTube tutorials, she replied dryly in English, filling his glass. Nikolai chuckled. It was a dark, rich sound that made the fine hairs on her arms stand up. I don't think so. You have the posture of a ballerina and the tongue of a Vol. That is a dangerous combination. I'm just a waitress, Mr. Sokolov. Enjoy your steak. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. It wasn't a shout, just a low command that cut through the restaurant noise. I didn't dismiss you. Cassidy froze. She turned back slowly. Is there something else? Nikolai leaned forward, resting his chin on his steepled fingers. The candlelight danced in his icy eyes. Tell me, why is a woman who speaks the high dialect of St. Petersburg scrubbing tables in Manhattan? You speak the language of the inner circle, the old families. My grandmother was Russian, she lied effortlessly. She taught me. She was very strict about grammar. And did your grandmother also teach you how to look at a man with a gun and calculate how to kill him? Nikolai asked softly. Because that is what you did when Dmitri touched you. You didn't look for an exit. You looked for a weapon. Dmitri stopped chewing his steak. He looked from his boss to the waitress, suddenly realizing he might have been closer to death than he thought. Cassidy's expression didn't change. You have an active imagination, sir. I just wanted him to let go of my arm. We shall see. Nikolai picked up his knife and cut into his steak with surgical precision. I will be watching you, Cassidy. Don't disappoint me. For the next hour, Cassidy felt his gaze burning into her back. Every time she refilled a water glass at another table, every time she punched an order into the computer, she felt him. He wasn't just eating dinner. He was hunting. When they finally finished, Nikolai paid the bill in cash. A stack of crisp $100 bills left on the table. He didn't leave a tip. He left a card. It was black, heavy cardstock with a single golden embossed emblem, a wolf's head. No number. No name. Just the symbol of the Sokolov Bratva. Cassidy stared at it after they walked out. It was an invitation, or perhaps a summons. She scooped it up along with the cash and shoved it into her apron pocket. Her hands were shaking again, now that the adrenaline was fading. Cassidy! Silas rushed over, wiping sweat from his forehead. My God, what happened? Did you offend him? He left a fortune on the table. He's just an eccentric rich guy, Silas, she said, her voice tight. I'm clocking out. I feel sick. Go. Take the rest of the week if you want. Just don't quit. You're the only one who can handle the VIPs. Cassidy didn't plan on taking the week. She planned on taking the first bus to Montreal. She had a go bag in her apartment. Cash, a passport under the name Sarah Jenkins, and a prepaid burner phone. She changed out of her uniform in the locker room in record time. She threw on her oversized grey hoodie, baggy jeans, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. She pulled her hair down, letting it fall over her face. The goal was to transform from the elegant waitress back into a street urchin. She exited through the kitchen, nodding to the dishwasher, and pushed open the heavy steel door that led to the alleyway. The cold November air hit her like a slap. It smelled of wet pavement and exhaust. She took a deep breath, clutching her backpack straps. Straight to the subway. Don't look back. She took 3 steps into the alley and stopped. The lone street lamp at the end of the alley flickered. Beneath it, leaning against the brick wall, was a figure wreathed in cigarette smoke. It wasn't Dmitri or Victor. It was him. Nikolai Sokolov pushed off the wall and dropped his cigarette, crushing it beneath his polished Oxford shoe. "You change clothes fast," he said. "Running somewhere?" Cassidy didn't run. Running triggers the chase. Instead, she widened her stance slightly, shifting her weight to the balls of her feet. Her hand drifted toward her pocket, where she kept a tactical pen, a pointed shard of hardened steel disguised as a writing implement. "My shift is over," she said, her voice rougher now, dropping the polite server act. "I'm going home." Nikolai walked toward her. He moved with a predatory grace that was terrifying to behold in the narrow alley. "I don't think so. I looked into you, Cassidy Miller. It seems you didn't exist before 2021. No tax records, no high school diploma, no birth certificate. Just a social security number that belongs to a dead girl from Ohio." He stopped 5 feet away from her, close enough to smell his cologne, sandalwood, and gunpowder. "Identity theft is a crime," he mocked. "Should I call the police?" "Since when does the Pakan of the Sokolov family talk to the police?" she shot back. Nikolai smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, sharp and dangerous. There it is again. The knowledge. "You know my rank. You know my family." He took another step. Cassidy pulled the tactical pen from her pocket, gripping it in a reverse hold. Nikolai glanced at the weapon and laughed. "A pen? You plan to edit me to death?" "I plan to stick it in your carotid artery if you take one more step," she said calmly. The smile vanished from Nikolai's face. He looked at her with a sudden, intense seriousness. "Who are you? And don't lie to me. I know a soldier when I see one." "Who sent you? The Italians? The FSB?" "Nobody sent me," Cassidy hissed. "I'm nobody. I just want to be left alone. Nobody wants to be left alone. Everyone wants something. Power, money, revenge." He studied her face, searching for a ghost of recognition. "You look like him, you know, around the eyes." "Like who?" "An old friend. A man who died screaming." Nikolai's voice dropped. "Volkov!" Cassidy's heart stopped. She forced her face to remain stone. "I don't know who that is." "Liar." He reached for her. He wasn't attacking. He was reaching for her shoulder, perhaps to shake the truth out of her. But before his hand could connect, the alley exploded with light. High beams blinded them both. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the mouth of the alley, blocking the exit. The doors flew open. "Get down!" Cassidy screamed. She didn't think. Instinct took over. The training her father had beaten into her since she was 6 years old. She tackled Nikolai, driving her shoulder into his chest and knocking him behind a dumpster, just as the air filled with the deafening crack, crack, crack of automatic gunfire. Bullets chewed up the brick wall where Nikolai's head had been a second ago. Debris and red brick dust rained down on them. They were tangled together on the dirty asphalt behind the metal dumpster. Nikolai was heavy, a solid wall of muscle, but he moved with her, realizing instantly that they were under attack. "Yours!" she shouted over the gunfire. "No!" Nikolai reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek, black Sig Sauer. Rivals, the Georgian syndicate, probably. He popped up, fired 2 controlled shots, and ducked back down as a hail of bullets sparked against the metal dumpster. "I have 2 mags," Nikolai grunted, checking his weapon. "My car is around the corner, but we can't get past them." Cassidy looked around. The alley was a dead end behind them. The only way out was through the SUV full of gunmen. There were 4 men advancing, wearing ski masks and tactical vests. "Give me the gun," Cassidy said. Nikolai looked at her as if she was insane. "Excuse me? You're shooting center mass. They're wearing Kevlar vests. I can see the outline, she snapped, pointing at the advancing shadows. You're wasting ammo. Give me the damn gun.